Do, 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 do. And we are live here in the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner, as always. Today, I am super excited to have Keith Manley on the show with me today. Keith and I go way
Way,
back, to when I was like 8 years old or something. And
yeah,
that's a different story for a different day. But Keith, um, uh, Keith is a multifaceted, multi-talented person. He is an author. He is a full-time pastor. He is a musician, a songwriter, a fiction writer, and a nonfiction writer. And one reason that I wanted to get Keith on is Keith recently published a new book about using AI tools in your author uh, life, in your author business, and really takes a well balanced approach to using some of these new tools not to do the work for you, but to increase your productivity and to open new creative avenues. And I wanted to talk all about it today. So, Keith, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me today.
Hank, it's so good to be with you, my friend. I've been looking forward to this. I'm
I,
excited about it.
me too. Me too. Before we get into this to the specifics, let's tell folks a little bit about you. You have been writing uh, since the '80s.
Yeah.
I think we said, and like a lot of people who had this creative itch and felt that they were storytellers, but just didn't have an avenue. Bond, yes, the AI assisted author is Keith's new book, and we're gonna put all of his links into the show notes to make it easy for folks to find you. Sorry, I was looking at comments while I was talking. Yes, like what I was just saying is that Keith, like a lot of people who are authors, they are storytellers, but they just have not figured out a way to break in and to get their work out to the masses. And with the Kindle revolution, 15
Oh,
years or so ago, those doors just burst open, and the gatekeepers, were sidelined, and it really has opened up all sorts of avenues for people to publish and to get their thoughts out to the rest of the world. But it's also changed traditional publishing because they have had to respond to the new avenues that have opened up, and it really has become a better place that is that the author is back in control instead of the gatekeepers being in control. The author has all the power these days, and you can choose to indie publish. You can choose to go the traditional route. It's all in your control. And even in the early days, there was prejudice against people that indie published, and well, if you choose to do this, you can say goodbye to a traditional publishing career, and all of that has gone away.
right.
That's the power is back with the author. So what made you what made you want to write your first book? Do you remember what that first inclination was and what the driving force behind it was?
Well, my first book, which I still have not published yet, I'm going to get it out, but it was called Miracles Happen to Ordinary People. And that was what I saw as a pastor beginning. I just saw God do these amazing things, and I just had to chronicle it. I had to write it. I had to keep record of it. And then I wrote several. I wrote the Christ and the Seven Feasts of Israel because that's my favorite topic of teaching, of how God laid the foundational plan by giving Israel 7 holidays that Christ would fulfill exactly to the day. So it's just his first coming, his second coming. He laid it all out. So I wrote that book. And then my memoir called "This Is My Story." I wrote probably 5 different books that I never had published, and then a lady in my church told me about her book. She had published a book, and I'm like, wow. I've just every time I've looked into it, and it was thousands of dollars. I didn't want to waste that and then sell, just a few copies, and I wanted to be a good steward of the money God had given me. And when I asked, how much did it cost you to publish this, and it's like the cost of the book. It was literally no cost, and it just blew my mind. And I just began, like I do anything. If I do anything, I do it whole hog. And so I began researching it, and so I published my first book. I finished with my This Is My Story. I published it. Later, I would discover AI after that process, and I went back and redid it and did a second edition, and it took everything that I had written and made it flow so much better. And we've talked about this, of how the brick wall that so many people come up against with AI, they're so afraid of it. They feel like it's the mark of the beast, and which probably will one day be used by it. But I feel, Hank, like I'm sitting at the feet of Solomon when I'm literally working with Claude, which is my the predominant AI that I use
Yeah.
in writing, and it's designed for writers. It really is. And when you're writing with Claude, I literally feel like I'm sitting at the feet of Solomon. We talked about how I'll feed in my sermon notes in a PDF, and say, take this, organize it better, help me develop it, and it's unbelievable. And so I ran up to a lot of people who are like, well, you're not the author if you use AI to help you. Oh, well, my goodness, AI is just a tool.
Yeah.
I've worked with some of the best authors in the industry, both in writing, as well as even when I wrote one day with Reba Rambo and Jeff Ferguson. We were doing some writing on a song, and there's a couple books that they use for every time they write, and they take those out, and you use these books to help you, write in writing songs. And everybody uses tools. And what I'm probably talking too much, but
No, no, this is great.
what I discovered is that AI is a tool, and that tool is off the charts amazing. Yeah.
Well, I talk a lot about the experiences that you have in life and how each of these things add to your writer toolkit.
Yeah.
And your writer toolkit is this thing that you carry around with you, and you draw from this experience, and that adds to
Oh,
it.
yeah.
You learn this skill, and that adds to it. And for me, this is just another thing that I draw from in my writer toolkit. What was your first experience with using AI? Because the AI of 3 years ago
Yeah.
versus like the Claude chat that we have today, wildly different. And so when you first started experimenting with it, did you see the potential?
Let
Did
me
it
tell you how I came
discourage you?
about. I was working for, and I just quit last week. I worked for about a year and a half for the third largest Christian network, radio network, and I would do the voice for like Cincinnati, Memphis, Philadelphia, all these radio stations. I would be the voice of all their voiceovers and commercials and all this. And one day, the president, he's talking to me, and he said, "Keith, I need you to write some liners for the station." And I thought, oh man. And I'm like, what am I gonna do? And he's like, "Hey, Keith, just use AI." And I'm like, use AI, and I'm like, well, how do I do that? And so then I started experimenting. I got ChatGPT. My secretary is a whiz. She's amazing with all this. She has a degree in media and technology and graphics and stuff. And so she showed me how, and I got to using it, and I'm like, oh my goodness, look at the liners that just gave me to record with my voice. Of course, then later I would discover that I could clone my voice, and literally, Hank, you could not tell the difference in a commercial I did with my voice or the commercial I did with 11 Labs, which perfectly cloned my voice. Of course, I live in the People's Republic of Illinois, and so it's illegal, the People's Republic of Illinois, for me to even let my cloned voice read my books. Even in Suno just came out with now the music program where
Yeah.
now you can clone your voice. Everybody's been begging for it for the last year. They just now came out this last week with the ability to do that. except, of course, it would not work for me in the People's Republic of Illinois because they have some law they passed in 2025, supposedly to protect people, but it really stopped people like me from even using my own voice.
Mm.
But I found a workaround with VPN. All of a
Oh,
sudden, I was in
I
Germany.
was gonna ask if you had tried. Yeah.
I was in Germany, and then I was able to make Suno do it, but Suno didn't really do a good job cloning my voice. But the 11 labs, I'm telling you the truth, I just did some
Wow.
radio programs of my fresh oil shows. I did totally with my clone voice,
Oh, wow.
and you cannot
That's
tell the
amazing.
expressions. It has my expressions, my pauses. Everything is perfect. It's crazy.
Wow, wow.
Yeah,
So, Keith, when you first start talking about this, people have very strong reactions, uh, and and uh, and not that I disagree with some of the strong
right.
reactions,
Some of
because
it's legit.
um, and I think some of the misconceptions, shall we just say, um, is that people think that you can just sit down to Claude or Chat GPT and say, "Write me a book," and it just spits out a book, and then authors are, shelved and have no need for authors anymore. That is a wild misconception.
Absolutely.
That's not how it works. So, what would you say to the people that fear that AI chatbots are going to put authors out of business?
Well, first of all, in my book, I know you read it, but my first chapter, I talk about what AI is and what AI is not. And
Yeah,
I get into the fact that AI doesn't have a mind. It doesn't have a soul. It's amazing with the information it can collect, but it's not going to replace the John Grishams of this world,
right.
because every good book has to begin with a good idea. And
Yeah.
yeah, you can get that idea. I can say to ChatGPT, give me 10 ideas for a legal
Mhm.
thriller, and it will give you 10 ideas. Well, usually if I've and I do write under a pen name, I write legal thrillers because John Grisham's my favorite author, and I've been doing some of
Mine
that,
too.
and I love it. But the thing is you'll have to go through, sometimes 30 to find one decent idea,
Right.
and then develop that. But I've had people who were critical saying, "Oh, wow," because I've got a lot of books, and they're like, "Oh, wow, AI wrote all these books." And I'm like, "Try it. Try to let AI write." And they go into ChatGPT and write me a book, and then they'll give it and then they're like, "That doesn't work, does it?" Because it'll just go off in la la land,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but using it as a tool, it's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the way it makes things flow. From my book Christ and the Seven Feasts, that when I first wrote it, it was this size, and this is
Yeah.
the cover of it. And again, it's one of the greatest theological concepts in the Word of God. When I rewrote it and said, ChatGPT, find the weak links that I had in my book and help me develop it. Look at the difference.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was off the charts, how it improved by mainly by doing research. You could not do the research in years that Claude can do in 60 seconds, and that's what's amazing.
Right.
It'll go back even when I'm writing my biographical novels, which that's my main thing is I have 55 biographical novels I've done on all the characters of the Bible. I just did Mary, the mother of Jesus, and it was amazing. But it will research the time period, so everything is according to the way the time was. Now it makes mistakes. That's one thing that people don't realize is
Yeah.
AI can make mistakes. It can't count. It'll put a phrase and say 4 words when it's really 12 words. Uh,
Right.
you ever try to do a cover, the text will be absolutely horrible. Uh,
Atrocious.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I literally find myself editing and copying and pasting letters and pasting, and then sometimes I just get so frustrated, I just, say, "Leave the back cover off," 'cause it usually can do the front cover, and it can do the spine. The rear cover, it's a disaster, and I discovered a program called Easy Cover Maker, and it's phenomenal. I've worked back and forth with the helping him, the author of the program. I helped him because in the beginning it was not coming out, the right for Kindle, and so I had to tell him, man, you're not got the right resolution. This has to change. And we worked back
Right.
and forth, and their latest update is phenomenal. and it's so cheap. People, man, I spent even on Fiverr, I spent a lot of money doing covers only to
Yeah.
be disappointed in them, and I do them for zero cost now because that's a one-time fee when you buy the easy cover program, which I put a link in my book. Instead of spending hundreds of dollars on it, they can get it for $49. And it's amazing the way that's one of my favorite parts of the
Yeah.
whole process. I love the
I
design.
I was not familiar with Easy Cover Maker, and I thought I had seen every
Oh,
service, for publishing, and I was blown away at
yeah,
how
it's
easy and
it's
yeah,
amazing because now the one thing I don't understand is it's different if you use cream paper rather than white paper. I think cream paper is a little thicker, so you have to actually put the
yeah,
page numbers. You put whether you're going to use a paperback or hardcover. You do all that, and there has to be a different design for paperback than it is hardcover. So
yeah.
so I always
It's
begin with number one, the Kindle. So you get the front cover, and then I do
right.
the other. But I love that process.
Yeah.
I could just spend an entire day just doing covers because I just love them. You know. Yeah. But I'm a
So y
storyteller. I remember when I started my radio or my television
yeah,
program show, I did that for I don't remember how many years, 7 years on the TLN network or something like that. And I'm in Pastor Jimmy Snow's studio in Nashville. He has a big television studio. He had a big television studio back in the day. And we're sitting around the piano, and I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know what he's the one that wanted me to do TV. I'm like, I got a face for radio. Man, I'm a radio host. What am I doing? And he said, Keith, you're a storyteller. You've always been a storyteller. He says, just tell the stories. And that's really what writing is. It's telling the story. It's getting into the characters and telling their stories, you
yeah,
know. And so I begin my memoir by saying life is a series of stories. The things that happen to us, the things that that God just orchestrates, and it's amazing. It's a mosaic of all the stories of our life, and
yeah.
that's what life is. It's a series of stories.
Well, I've thought for quite a while that we as human beings are storytelling creatures. There's something innate about us that tells stories.
Yeah,
Um, and so I think we are storytellers by nature.
yeah, we are.
Ri- Writers, that's the same concept, with steps added. But one and I've often wondered if is writing a thing that can be taught? Is it a storytelling gene that you're born with or not? And what I've found interestingly is that um, we are storytelling creatures, and with some of these tools, they can help us to take that step that maybe we've not been able to take so far.
Don't you
Um,
think that just about everybody has a book in them?
oh yeah, yeah, and I've said this forever, Keith, that I think if you were stuck in an elevator with 100 people, that would be a terrible experience, by the way. But if you were to ask them, who in here thinks that you have a book inside you, I would I would think almost everyone would say, yeah, I think I do. And then if you were to poll that same 100 people and say, how many of you have tried to write a book? Maybe half of those hands would go up there. And then you say, well, how many of you have actually finished a manuscript? And then you get down to
That's
maybe
what
5 people. And then well, how many of you have published that? You'll be lucky if you get one.
absolutely.
Um, yeah, but now we're at a place where uh, the uh, the playing field is starting to um, with KDP for one, where the gatekeepers have been, moved out of the way, where publishing is actually something that's possible and attainable for almost everyone.
Anyway,
Yeah, and so like technology is moving us closer to be able to do these things that we have not felt like that have been out of reach for so long.
yeah.
And it's really incredible that and yes, because of that, we see more and more entries into the uh,
Self-publishing kind of,
w- yeah. So there's more competition now,
yeah.
um, but that's okay because you have more to choose from, and there's I don't see that as a bad thing. Of yes, there's more competition out there, but there's also more choice, and there's more. There's something for literally everybody.
And Hank, I don't write for money. And my wife sometimes she just hates it because I will literally write for 6, 7 hours at a time. I'll usually begin after dinner, and
Yeah,
on a daily basis. I'm talking about most days. Recently, I'm getting ready to do a surgery. I'm flying to Florida for a back surgery, so it's slowed down this last few days. But I love to write, and sometimes I'll write till 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, and I absolutely love it. But when I get something going, it's hard for me to stop, because while
yeah,
it's flowing, while the energy's
right.
there, while it's flowing, and I was absolutely shocked. I knew I would sell some books in my church, because I pastor a
Yeah,
church. And there's a lot of
sure.
people here, and so I knew I would sell that. But what stunned me is I made thousands of dollars last year on Amazon from people I'll never meet.
Right.
I don't know if they heard it advertised on my radio program, or I don't really know how good the search thing does on KDP, but oh my goodness, I was like stunned every day to log on and see how many pages someone read in my book, how many books sold, which books sold,
Right.
but I do believe that if you find a niche, if you find an area that that you can say, this is my genre, this is my niche. Like when I did the biographical novels, I don't know anybody else who has done that. There's one person that I found on KDP that's kind of attempted it, but they look so poor quality. The covers just look horrible, and so for me, when a person reads one of the books, they're gonna go and start on the next one. They
Right.
keep going. And so that's one of the biggest advice I could give anybody is find your niche, find that your
Yeah.
spot. The same way is true in the body of Christ. Each of us fit in a certain area, and don't be afraid of AI. It's a tool, and it's
Yeah.
not gonna control you. Don't lose yourself in AI, because I know there are people
Sure.
that totally lose their creative skills because they're so intimidated because AI can be near perfect, and they lose their self, because then you're just going to end up with a plastic book. It's got to
Yeah.
have your soul. It's got to have your input. It's got to have you going back and forth. And but what I found is what I write, whether it's a song or whether it's a book, AI can take that, Claude can take that, and just absolutely make it flow with vocabulary that I missed, with just a structure that is so amazing, you know. So I would be at the top of the list of people saying, "Don't be afraid of this. Welcome it. It's not going to go away. Well, no matter what people think.
Yeah.
The genie is out of the box. We're not going to go back to the steam engine. You know, uh,
Right.
we're in a new day." Um, and I just see it as a gift from God, that He's given us, for this time period we're living in. We're in the age of intelligence exploding, and the Bible speaks about that. By the way, it speaks about in the last days about this. Knowledge will increase, and will go to and fro on the earth, and that's certainly happening with AI. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I did a fun exercise about a year ago when really the topic of conversation was, AI was everywhere, and people were talking about it, and people were experimenting with it, and of course, and some of it for good reason was being uh, people were very skeptical about it, and skeptical about how things were going to be used, and things like that. But I started looking at uh, what people's opinions were when word processors first started being used. And
Oh,
if you do a search and look for authors in the 19 really 1970s and 80s,
yeah.
when you could have a computer in your home with a word processor, and
Right.
look at the authors that were using typewriters, and see the things that they said about how word processors were going to kill creativity
Mhm.
and all of that. I mean, it's wild, some of the same arguments. And then you
Oh,
look at at the folks who said that typewriters were going to kill the creativity of people that wrote longhand. And,
Yeah.
I mean, fountain pens,
Oh,
any new technology, people
people
are
were
going to people are going to be up in arms about it. It's hilarious. Um, so you write nonfiction as well as fiction.
right.
Is your approach different when you start a new project? Your biographical series, for instance, these are narrative nonfiction. I guess you would say is a
Yeah.
maybe a good way to characterize it. Um, do you approach the beginning of that differently? Where it like your feast book, when you start out with an idea, do you approach Claude differently? How do you start the conversation?
Well, when I'm doing a theological book, it's totally different. I'm going to mainly depend on my study notes. I'm going to be putting those in through a PDF form
Yeah,
and into Claude, having it go through this and really teaching it my theology and going through that. And sometimes there'll just be back and forth dialogue, and you know how Claude does. It'll come back and forth with you.
yeah,
And so it's so important with that that I'm exact on my theology. When I'm writing the biographical novels, I begin by saying, today I'm going to write another book in my series, the biographical novel series, and I'm going to do this about Nehemiah, let's say. And so I'll say, search the scriptures, give me the full story of Nehemiah, and I want to stay true to the scriptures, but I want to fill in with fictional parts that the scripture leaves out. Nothing to take away from the story, but fill in the family, fill in his growing up, make it where it's interesting to the reader, where it grabs a hold of them, and it like it just puts soul in the story, and it's amazing how that has worked out. The funny thing is, two of my favorite Bible characters are Hosea, which is one of my favorite books that I did on Hosea, because I love the story of Hosea and Gomer, prophets told to go marry a prostitute. That was one of my favorite books to write. And then one of my other stories is Onesimus. Now, you'll only find a handful of verses in the entire Bible about Onesimus, but he is an amazing character. He was a runaway slave, and so I just had to, a lot of that I had to just create a backstory, how he winds up at seeing Paul in Rome, and how Paul knew his master Philemon, and how he sent him back and said, if he owes you anything, I'll pay it. And so what I do is I want to stay true to the scripture, because I don't want to take
mhm,
away from that. And some people will be critical of that. I've not had that on any of my reviews, but I saw it on the other guy that writes some biographical stuff. Somebody just tore him up, saying, "You're adding to the scripture. You're going to have the curses of the law upon you and all this." No, and I usually put a disclaimer in there that this is a biographical novel. So, and I usually try to say what's fictional. The Bible doesn't tell his wife's name, but I put a name in here, and his
yeah,
children or something, and but it really draws people in the scriptures. I have to laugh with my wife, because she goes and every book I write, she'll go in and check it for the scripture. Just I'm like, do you not trust me or what? And she's really searching it. And she's like, wow, but it draws you in to the story, where you may
yeah,
just, how many stories have we read? Or like, for example, I was at dinner with a pastor friend, and my wife and I and her and her husband, and she says, oh, I got a great biographical novel for you to write. I'm like, who? She said, Rizpah. And I'm like, who the heck is Rizpah? Come to find out, Rizpah was Saul's concubine, and I thought, well, how would that be a story? When I got into the story, it's an amazing story of a mother who, when her sons were crucified, because of the king, what the king did, her sons were crucified. She stayed there and would not leave the site, and God held rain back, and it was an amazing story. I had read over the story of Rizpah, because I've read the Bible through how many times, never ever got it until I did the biographical novel on her, and then it was one of the most powerful stories I ever told. You know,
it's it's so interesting because if we're the ability to bring out the nuance of the, like you said, a story that you've read over and over and just never brought out, but this tool that can then go and
Research it.
find the nuance and pull it out and present it in a way that you can then represent, um, to your audience is
Yeah,
amazing. And
it is.
we really live in an amazing time. It's
It's funny
incredible.
because sometimes when I'm working with, whether it's more ChatGPT than Claude, when I'm working in ChatGPT, it'll do something terrible, and it'll just write terrible out, and I'll go on and say, "If you had a boss, I would report you right now." And it'll come on and it'll say, "Oh, Keith, I have failed you. I am so sorry I failed you. Please give me one more try." Cracks me up because I'm like, "Oh my goodness." Well,
That's
y
so funny.
yeah, it's hysterical.
That's so
But
funny.
but I
You
really wanna encourage everybody listening. I know most of the people probably, listening today are authors, but if you're listening and you're not an author, you've never penned down, maybe you have a journal. My friend Rhonda Gunn, she has the most amazing journals, where, she's writes all the stuff, happening in her life, and if you have a journal, take that journal and begin to put it. I went to lunch with a young guy. He grew up in my church, came through my Awana program, was 11 years old last time I saw him. His father was killed in Afghanistan. He's now like 26, graduated Marquette. He works in IT, and he has a genius IQ. And we went to lunch Sunday, and oh my goodness, when I heard his story, of course, you know what was going through my mind? Every time he would tell me another story, I'm saying, this is a book.
right,
I've got to write this book. He
right.
was in this gang and in a house, and two or three of his friends were killed, and he was the only one that walked away. And God was saying, "Hey, I got a plan for your life." And every story he would tell me, Hank, I kept saying, "This is a book," you know. And most of the people listening now, you've probably had that same experience where
Oh yeah.
things have happened to you that the world needs to hear. You know.
Yeah. Uh, I've often said that, one of the most trite questions that a writer ever gets asked by an interviewer is, "Where do you get your ideas from?"
Mhm.
Because ideas are everywhere. They're literally everywhere. And for so long, I would say, but what's really interesting is the ideas that float a little higher than the others, the ones that just stand out and say, "I need to be written." Well, we're in an interesting time because now we're able to take more of those ideas
Yeah.
and flesh them out and get to a point where they can actually come out. And whereas we used to think, well, a writer can put out one, maybe two books a year,
Yeah.
and and you really have to concentrate on which ideas you choose because you don't want to
Right.
waste a bunch of
Yeah,
time. Well,
absolutely.
when you're using Claude, you can say, I have this idea, and it's and this goes with it, and this what do you think we could do with this, and just start a conversation, and you can, within a half hour, you can
Develop.
figure out if that idea is going anywhere or not. and
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 then
if
I
it's
use
not,
I
you
use
can say, okay, scrap that, or let's rephrase it or whatever. But yeah.
always use a specific phrase to Claude. I will say, uh, arc this over somewhere between 15 to 20 chapters,
Hmm.
and keep it at 200 to 250 pages, and I'll do that, and then it'll outline and arc that story, and it'll give me ideas, and some of it I like, some of it I don't. I'll go back and say,
Hmm.
let's rework this because but it literally, you can write a book, and in 2 weeks, that's sitting on your porch with Amazon delivered it.
Yeah.
Literally, it can go that fast,
It's
you know?
wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
Who would have thought, you know?
What one thing that I've noticed, and it began with my wife and I when I was writing my first couple of novels, is that I would have an idea and I'd kind of stew on that idea, and I would come home after work, and we had a swing in our yard, kind of, the two person swing,
Yeah,
and we would sit in the yard and watch the kids play, and we would just talk, and I would say, I had this idea for a story, and it's this character and they do this, and she would say, "Oh, that's fun. What if they did this?" And then all of a sudden a new lane of possibilities would open up in my mind, and I would say, "Oh, and then they could do this." and we would go back and forth, and the kernel of an idea that I had mixed with the kernels of ideas that she had all of a sudden become bigger than either one of us individually could ever come up with. And so
Absolutely.
there's an interesting synergy that happens when two people converse about something. And what I've found is I can get a lot of that from Claude with I could say I have this idea, it's this sort of book, and it's a character like this, and I'm thinking about this is their trouble. And then, what do you think about that? And then Claude could come back and say, "Oh, that's interesting. What if they did this?" And then
Absolutely.
all of a sudden, all kinds of things just open up, possibilities that I never would have seen on my own. And for me, that uh, has been so advantageous that the I'm struggling to put it in words. The thing that happens when two people imagine together,
Yeah.
and you get a lot of that with. It's not perfect, but it, if you have your conductor hat on and you're keeping the trains on the track, you know
Mhm.
it's amazing what you can do.
Yeah, I found, my wife gives a lot of input because she reads, she's usually the first one to read. And it is important. I have a couple friends that I send, my books to. Tell me what you think of this, and it's so good to get people's input, and sometimes we make mistakes. I've made mistakes in
Yeah,
books. But the amazing thing is I did one last night where I had to go in and correct something, and within one day it's corrected, and everybody else who gets the book is going to get get it corrected. And that's who would have ever thought that? Imagine that in
right,
the olden days.
right,
Yeah,
right. So Keith, if there are people listening that maybe are nervous or skeptical about bringing some of these tools into their writing process,
yeah.
what would be a practical entry for them, that because we don't want to just put out AI drivel, as a lot of people have called it, and we do want to stay in the captain's chair of our own creative life. Uh, how do you balance that? And what would be a good entry point for folks to bring these tools in and start getting the benefit from them while still maintaining control?
I would begin with taking whatever book that they're writing or whatever book they have written. Like, for example, this is my story. When I did that, take one chapter, just put it in a PDF, put it into Claude, and say, "Can you make this better? Can you please
Mm.
improve what I have written?" And then watch, because within, 5 minutes, you're gonna have something that'll blow your mind of how much it improved and just made it flow better. Because sometimes we have the right idea, we wrote it, it might even be good, but there's a difference in good and the best it can be,
Right.
and so that's what I do, and what I have found, is that when you write it in there and then have it improve it, because again, it's a writing partner. That's what it is. It's really a co-writer with you. I mean, only a human can copyright. AI cannot copyright something because it's not a human. But it really is a co-writer, and everything you do with it, because it's like I love to co-write songs. I've written a number of songs with my friend Scott Wesley Brown. I've written with a number of Christian artists, and those are some of the best times. I mean, Scott and I wrote like 4 or 5 songs in one day. He's like, "Keith, I've never done this." But we found that working together was so much better than working by ourselves doing
Yeah.
something. We both have had hit songs, but man, one of his favorite songs, "I Belong to You," we wrote it together, and as we were pinning it together, going back and forth, bouncing off, uh, because iron sharpens iron, and that's
Yeah.
literally when you're using AI, it's like, man, iron sharpening iron, and it makes it so much better. So I would say, number 1, lay aside your fear of AI. It's not going away. Um, It can be used for bad, like the web. The web is used for incredible, great things. I discovered a childhood friend by using the internet and living in Alaska. My friend Monty, who we were friends. I tried to search for him for years, but one day the internet allowed me to find him, and we reconnected and stay in touch now. The AI is the same way. It's not going away. You might as well use it for the good. And there's so many things just besides writing books. It's incredible. I use it with my radio program, helping me write scripts for my programs. Because I do so much. I got so many things going on that it literally makes my time so much more managed. It's incredible.
That's great. Your new book, The AI Assisted Author: My Real Workflow for Writing, Designing, and Publishing with Claude,
Yeah.
ChatGPT, and Amazon KDP. Tell folks what the book is about, what it is that you're presenting, and why it might be useful for them.
Okay, this is the book that you're talking about. It's my latest book called The AI Assisted Author, and what I did with that is I have a couple pastor friends that I recently helped them write their book, and helping Scott with a new book he's doing right now on hymns and back and forth, and I know that God has helped me. I'm not going to say master. Nobody masters AI, but God has helped me really get a workflow that it makes it so easy. And I wanted to somehow take that and be able to give it to the average person, not just my pastor friends, but anybody
Mhm.
who's always wanted to write a book, because it's a workflow that works. And so in this, I begin, like I say, with what AI is and what AI is not. I want people to understand that, to not be afraid of it. And then I just work through chapter by chapter how to do it, how you start, how the author is still in charge, even though you're using AI, how to build the framework, how to do an outline, go through every process. And then I get to the Kindle KDP, because I don't know if do you use KDP?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And yeah,
yeah,
I self-publish, and I have some with a traditional publisher as well. So
okay.
yeah.
So with self-publishing, I wanted people to see how, for me, KDP is about a 40-minute process for me. From the time I've got my manuscripts all done, it may take me 30, I mean, 30 minutes is probably stretching it. But 30 minutes to go in. I begin with my ebook, because the reason I do that is, number one, it spell checks. and
Right.
and and so I'll find something that I miss somehow, or I put an extra space in something or whatever. So I always begin with my ebook. I publish that first on KDP, and then I know everything's perfect when that's done. It'll come up and say congratulations, and so I do that. Then I go and do my paperback, and I upload that in the manuscript, and the design I got off Easy Cover Design. I put that in. And I used to, in the beginning, it would take me so long doing KDP because the size would not be right on the cover. And I would go in and use a Photoshop to try to make it bigger, but it would stretch and sometimes not be right. Now they're perfect every time.
Yeah.
So I do the paperback, and I get that up, and then finally I do it gets easier as you go along. Then I do the hardcover, and it already has the categories you enter and the keywords and everything. All I got to do is say yes, I used AI for however much you used it for, and put that in, and then boom, all three are published within 30 minutes. And then it takes about 24 hours, and I get the notice that they're live on Amazon. And so my only cost involved, you know, is my first book, which I'll pay about, $16 for this
Yeah.
hardcover, or 10.99 for my paperbacks. That's what it cost me to write that book. You know,
Right.
I order one of each, so it cost me usually 26, $27 is what it cost me to have a hardcover, a Kindle, and a paperback. And that was my total expense. We're used to, oh my goodness, you paid for a graphic designer, you paid for an editor, you paid for you had to order so many books.
Right.
So that's I'm just blown away by that. I see that as just a gift from God for the average Joe who would have totally been overlooked by publishers, but he can now write a book, and it cost him almost nothing.
I love it. I love it. Keith, I'm going to put a link to that book in the show notes. And also, when we release this on our audio podcast tomorrow, I'll include all that in the show notes. But also tell people where they can find you if they want to dig into your books, number one, and all the stuff that you do. Where's the best place to find you?
To get my books, it would be Ben Mira. That's and it's actually my three children's names: Ben, Michelle, and Sarah. So I put it together for Ben Mira is the name of my publishing company, Ben Mira Books, and same way I have a music publishing company with that. So if you go Ben Mira, BenMiraa.com, that'll take you there to. I think it goes to my Amazon authors page. And then I have WeNeedGod.com, which that's a great name. I got that obviously back in the 80s, and whenever they first started registering names, that was one of the first names I registered. So it's a great name. So WeNeedGod.com. They can reach me at KeithManley.com. They can reach me at GraceFamilyChurch.com. But I have a daily podcast called Fresh Oil. And Fresh Oil is on all the podcast formats, and it's basically a teaching program. I take a topic and I spread it out over 5 days. And so I have a podcast for that. I do a short 1-minute daily podcast called Reflections of Grace, which is just an encouraging, uplifting. All the computerized radio stations love it, including Meridian. They play it there on WMER because they need to have a 1-minute filler. So I have that up as a podcast. So I'm all over on the web. They're pretty easy to find. Man, I have so enjoyed today.
I have too, Keith, and I'm going to put all those links in the show notes to make it easier for folks to find you. Let's do this again sometime. This was so much fun.
Seeing you sometime in the next couple of months. I'm going to get back down to Meridian, and let's say my radio program airs on WMER, and it's like 105 every day, but people can get it on the podcast format. But man, I so enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to sitting down at a Mexican restaurant when I get there.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone, and Keith and I will go get some nachos or something.
Let's do it.
Yeah, all right.